So this one's a super special interview for me. As a content creator, one of my favorite things is being able to sit down and talk with other software engineers in the creator space that I really look up to. My guest today is Derek Comartin of CodeOpinion.com. Now, Derek and I talk through his career journey, and we get to see how a lot of what he's been working on really influences how he's been able to come up with architectural patterns in his decision-making process. We talked about things like agile software development and being able to work in consulting and really shape your perspective on working with stakeholders and understanding how to communicate with them effectively. And Derek is very well known for being able to say context is king and really take situations that you might have a very biased opinion about and walk through them in ways that get you to think about them from different angles, because without the full context, it's really difficult to make a decision. So I got to pick his brain on that and see his thought process and how he can really channel that in basically every conversation he has. So again, this one's super special for me. I think that you're really going to enjoy it. So sit back, enjoy. I'll see you next time. Derek, to get started, I guess if you don't mind giving us a little bit of background for, and you can kind of start as early as you'd like, but kind of where you got started and how you got to where you are in your career.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So, I guess I'll summarize it, which is like I live in the kind of the business app world, primarily always working on larger, full scale systems that really run kind of a line of business. That's just kind of the lane I've been in. I didn't necessarily like plan it that way. It's just kind of maybe geography, what was in my area, companies that I worked for. It's just kind of always been that way. So a lot of the stuff that I post, you can see how it usually revolves around bigger sales systems and that type of stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. I always tell people I've never really got into like other realms of like, say, like gaming or something like that,
Okay.
development in games. Although that's really what kind of set me on the path of getting into software
Right.
was games. It was kind of like modding games, building out like kind of websites that were like more tracking for like tracking purposes of
Okay.
games, stuff like that, like leaderboards and stuff like that. And that's actually kind of what got my interest in it. But I've always kind of been in that line of business space. So almost everything I post really revolves around that experience, basically. But in terms of like the companies where I'm at, a lot of it, again, this is like no intention of any of this is has always, not always, of the vast majority of it has been startups.
Okay.
The first company I ever worked for was a startup. The second one was kind of in the .com era bubble. That was a startup. Then the longest stint I had was actually working for a company that was local to me, but did across Canada more warehousing and kind of
Okay.
direct to consumer type products. So I did a lot of that for a good 8 years probably there.
Mm.
And that was a big learning experience basically because it's a big system. It's like for warehousing. So, and then, which I highly recommend to everybody. And I just said this to somebody the other day. After that, I worked at a kind of professional services consulting company.
Okay.
And that was also another mind bender on how I viewed writing software, decision making. Because I say it's not for everybody,
Sure.
and it's, I think it's kind of a difficult world to live in a little times because there's so many factors that can affect your decisions. But I love the fact that it forced me to think about the business side of what
Right.
people are really trying to accomplish, and like the costs involved when you're estimating, or basically where you can see. I always tell people, even if you're just doing it on your own
Yeah.
and you did, say, project based work, and you had to estimate your effort, and you can see the bottom line, how that like really starts changing your decisions versus, oh, I work for this big company, and it never even crosses your mind on how you actually get paid.
Right. Did you notice that, like, I I have not done sort of the consulting or the sort of the work on my own where I'm doing those estimations and for a client, but I tell people like startup compared to Microsoft, I'm like, I definitely in startup world had to think a lot more around like the cost of things, or it seemed more like there was more awareness. Did you find like for being at startups that you still had a lot of that, but obviously the consulting part, like that would be a lot more visible because it's like directly in your control?
Yeah, I would say they're similar. They're different. Like the startup world, the mentality, I guess, depending on what your role is in it.
Sure.
But if you kind of have more of a decision making role, there's this balancing act of, I like saying, like you're trying to make it. You're making the best decisions you can to push forward.
Right.
Like you're making a decision right now, so you have a tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Like you not everything can be gold plated, not everything can be perfect, even though that's why I like the whole um, mentality, or people talk about like technical debt. I
Right.
have such a different view of it, because for me it's actually a explicit decision you're making. It's
Hmm.
not like this accidental one. For me, I never really think of it that way. It's like, oh, we just did this crappy thing this crappy way and didn't realize it till after the fact. To me, that's not really the case. It's more of a, we're doing this now explicitly. We know this is not maybe the most ideal thing in the long run,
Yeah.
but it gets us to tomorrow,
Yeah.
which is a very different way of thinking about stuff, but it's more of a very an explicit thing. I think the consulting thing is, it's very similar. It's just you're more like you're just more aware of time. I can't remember the name of I might be getting this wrong, so somebody can
All good.
correct me. I think it's called like Parkinson's Law, I think is what it's called. And I might be butchering this, but it's to the effect, which I find has always been true, which is, if I told you you had tasks to do,
Mm, yeah.
right, and I gave you 2 days, it would take you 2 days.
Yeah.
If I gave you 2 weeks, you'd find a way to make that fit 2 weeks.
Yep. And
And if,
I think it is Parkinson's law. That sounds
yeah,
familiar. Yeah.
and I feel like that's held true all the time, and I've noticed it the most, like in kind of that consulting project based world.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a very fascinating thing because I have seen it happen. Like maybe the sort of the reason why it happens or the scenario around it is different. So like in startups, it almost always felt like, hey, there's too much to do. So like the time window you have is very small, and it's like, okay, like the work we're going to get done somehow is going to fit into this tiny box. And then I find like especially like at Microsoft in comparison, the things move slower, and there's many reasons for that. I don't say that to mean like therefore it is worse, but when things move slower, it's like, yeah, there's times where I'm looking at the work for some feature or something and I'm like, the complexity of that's not really that much, but the way we talked about this was it's going to take a week or 2 weeks, and therefore it literally will take that time. Like it just fills up the time. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I remember thinking about it, and once I actually there was a name to it and read about it, I was like, oh, yeah, this is exactly what happens most of the time, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so like that's kind of the world I've always lived in. And again, I think everybody's path's unique, and mine just happened to be, a lot of the times, because I was in startups, being in a position to kind of make more decisions about the
Mhm.
direction technically of the products or projects that I was working in, which at some points I was totally unqualified for. Um, but you kind of push through and, yeah, gain some experience from it.
Would you say that like that's a very interesting statement, especially because for people that know all of your material, right? Like you absolutely come across as, and I know this is things that have evolved over time and you've learned and gained the experience, but you are you you are an expert in many of these areas. Would you say that, or sorry, we many of us perceive that of you,
Yeah, probably.
and we value the material and the learning opportunities from you. So when you make that statement when you're like, was wildly unqualified for some of these things, would you say at that point in time, like, was that something that you were conscious of where you're like, oh man, I have to go push forward on like on this decision or this architecture, I'm responsible for it, and you're sitting there going like, oh man, like I don't know about that? Or was it more like in hindsight you're thinking back going, oh,
Yeah, I think. I don't know. It's probably in hindsight. But my, like at the time in any kind of, like I'm thinking of one particular project in general, which was kind of like a really big rewrite of something.
Okay.
It was some really old technology, and I highly don't recommend rewriting things just like blatantly. And I posted about this in circumstances where it can make sense, and all the things that go along the way. Is that one of the issues with it has been like, or with it is what makes you think you know kind of all the intricacies of the old system that you're going to be able to do that, like what makes sense in the old system that you need to implement going forward, or like what was there and doesn't even apply anymore. There's just a lot of history with things.
Yeah.
So in that case, if you're unfamiliar with it, that can be very, like, that's just one aspect that can be very difficult. In my case with that, I was around a long time before I was a part of the rewrite, like probably almost 7 years. So I
Yeah.
had a lot of backstory about where we were now, or like at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say I was very unqualified, that's the one I'm thinking of. Is like I was in maybe more of a technical sense, but not. I wasn't in a domain sense. Like I understood. I was there for quite a while. That I understood how the business operated and the changes that we made along the way to accommodate certain things. So that's why I'm pretty vocal oftentimes about being well aware about the domain that you're in and really understanding it. One of the, again, like in this world of writing kind of line of business stuff, one of the for sure the best developers I know in this space really understand the business.
Right.
It's not a, oh, I just know all these patterns and technical stuff. That is not it at all. I'd
Just gonna put
argue it's
repository
almost,
patterns here, factories here, and we're good and problem solved.
no, it's probably almost the reverse,
Hmm.
where it's like if you were to say like what are they better at, like technical or kind of have that business sense or in that domain, I'd argue it's probably they're a little, like they're very proficient technically, but actually probably have a little bit more, I don't know what to call it, like just business sense. Like they really get it and they get the domain that they're in and they can speak the language of stakeholders really well. They're not um, like it's. I don't want to say they're not technical because they are,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's just they have this really good skill set of understanding workflows, understanding business processing, really getting involved in it. This is for sure the best people I've worked with that are that way.
It's interesting, right? Because like a lot of the time, or at least when I'm talking with software developers, like one of the things I try to highlight is with technical skills, these are things you're going to be working on these your entire career. I don't even know if it's possible that like you're going to be getting worse technically in your career because there's always stuff that you're going to be working on. But I, especially for more junior people, the thing that I try to highlight to them is that you don't want to ignore the fact that if you want to continue to grow as a software developer, the sort of the communication part, like working with other people, understanding stakeholders, that's the kind of thing that like if you if you think that I'm going to be a programmer and I'm just going to like kind of put my programming hat on and go heads down and just code all day and not work with people, like that's dangerous because it's just going to be so limiting in your career that and it sounds like what you're saying is kind of resonating with that where it's like the people that really excel are the people that can work with those stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I don't know, like I think it just depends, maybe your environments, like places that you're in. Like, because what I mentioned earlier, like being in consulting for a little bit there is like you have to, like that's at least the world I was in. You're doing kind of, when people talk full stack, I'm talking like you're talking to the client, you're coming up with estimates, you're coming up working with a project manager, you're actually working as the developer or a part of the team or leading it. It's like the full gamut of stuff. So it's not just like you said, it's not a single hat of, oh, I'm just writing software all day. It doesn't really work that way. But again, that's just kind of the world that I've been in. To me, that was super beneficial. It gave me a lot more perspective,
Right.
I guess. A lot more context on the stuff that you work in rather than just, oh, like I don't really know who the end user is that's going to write to use this. It becomes, I guess in some ways it makes you, or late for me, it made me less concerned about certain things. And I think
Okay.
that in your little bubble of like, oh, I'm just developer writing this. I think maybe you, in that context, because you're just in that, you get a little bit more fixated on certain things that are important to you, but at the grand scheme of things don't really matter. So I
Right.
always say, like, it's in context here. I always say that. But like, for example, I say it all the time, which is, so let's say you're writing, again, like warehousing software or something like
Sure.
that. Person in the warehouse that's, say, printing out a shipping label, or, you know what I mean, shipping something out or receiving something, they do not care that you're using X technology or X framework. They want the thing to work. They want it to work well. They want it to be intuitive. They want it
Yeah.
to do their job, and they don't want it to get in the way. That's their end goal.
Right.
So you could say that, yeah, it does matter what technology you're using, but it's a means to an end. So
Right.
if you're using X technology and it's outdated and you can't move forward with it, then yeah, that's a problem for that end user, because you won't be able to keep up or be able to do things that make their life easier. So it all goes hand in hand, but I think there's a little bit sometimes getting fixated on some technical stuff that developers love that just really don't matter.
Right. Yeah, and I think that you said it really well, where like a lot of that stuff, it can be a means to an end, right? Like you're picking a technology, you're picking a stack, you're picking architectural patterns that help you achieve that, but truly the end user, they don't know any of that. Like, and it
No.
doesn't matter. Um it's but yeah, it's a means to an end. So
Yeah, like I know what people are thinking, like, yes, it does. I'm not saying it totally doesn't matter, because it does. There's a lot of factors to, yeah, like what you're choosing, how well that lets you move forward or iterate on things. Like, it obviously matters, but at the end of the day, like if you have a product written in .NET and some like C Sharp, and somebody has the exact same product written in, I don't know, Ruby on Rails or Python or something like that, is one fundamentally better because it was written one way, or like in one
right.
tool or another? Probably not really.
Like our customers making that, like that purchasing decision or that using usability decision based on, they're like, I got to go research which language this was built in, or else like I can't use it.
And that's the thing, is that like I've posted things like this and people say yes. I usually put the asterisk of like, if the people are like, if you're selling to developers, they care,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Or maybe if it's a certain type of enterprise and they need to integrate a particular way, they may care about some things like that. So yeah, it's all within context. But at the end of the day, like if I think of like some product that I use, I'm just looking at my
Yeah, we
bookmarks
got to look
here,
around
right?
to see what's up on screen.
Right? Do I ultimately know or care what this one service that I use is for whatever, like some
I don't know
functionality?
what Gmail's written in. I don't know. We're using StreamYard. I don't know what StreamYard's written in. It's working.
Exactly. So it's like, do you care? No, you want it to work, right? And you want it to solve your problems. Like, and as long as it keeps getting updated or features that you need and it's evolving and the underlying technology allows you to do that, then whatever. Like,
Yeah,
doesn't matter to me.
yeah. Huh. Okay, so you had mentioned too that when you were kind of walking through some of the career journey part, you had I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you kind of paused and you said, "I actually recommend this to everyone." But so, do you recommend that people have some part of their career where they do get exposed to like consulting? And I know you were saying it's not for everyone, but did you mean that like at least to kind of learn that about yourself, or to?
Yeah, I think if you're I'm just going based off my own experience of,
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
like
yeah.
the world I live in and kind of like line of business stuff. It made a world of difference. Like that was like a very key aspect of my career, was doing it. Um, because, like I said, because you just are, it changes decision making a lot, and especially in terms of, if you want to get more into like, okay, the aspects of, say, design and how you're designing systems, it affects it a lot, because you, like I was alluding to earlier, um, the different constraints of just physically knowing the cost of something and both sides of the equation of, okay, like what's revenue, what's cost, all these implications, and who's paying for something. And it just, it makes you much more aware of the whole situation that you're in, rather than, like I said earlier, just, oh, I just have this one task from whatever queue system or whatever we're doing, sprints or
Yeah.
some I'm on board, and like I'm just pulling a thing over and just do it, and it doesn't really matter. Like you don't really think about the implications of the time constraints of it, if there is it really even worth doing?
Sure.
Like how
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
effort to put into something, if it's like, because that's the thing in any system that you're building, right? There's kind of that Pareto 80/20, and most of the time you're not in the core, like you're kind of on the outside making stuff that, like, is it really even going to be used? What's really the value of it?
Right.
You can assume that, oh yeah, this thing's going to be awesome, this functionality that we're adding, and then like nobody really cares, right? So I think that's why I said I think it's useful. I think I got so much value out of doing the consulting aspect of it and estimating and working through projects and working with the project manager. Even to that effect, you could think of like that's not really your role, but you're kind of like in everything. I found a lot of value in it. That's why I think anybody that's in kind of that line of business world where you want to be designing systems, building systems, kind of greenfield up something bigger, if that happens to be in your path, I think it would be very beneficial.
Right.
I say it's not for everybody because it's a lot more mentally taxing,
Yeah.
to put it that way. Like, I guess maybe depending on your personality. Like, if you're for myself, like I want to be on the ball. I'm very concerned, probably more times about who like the stakeholders are, probably more than they are themselves. It's like a very personal pride thing. So you don't want to be wrong. You don't want to be doing the wrong thing. And there's just this weight of like making the wrong decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, you realize you can only make the best decision that you have at that time with the information that you have. And you really become just out of this kind of analysis paralysis. And and again, because of the startup stuff, you really iterate, push forward, and move forward, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, like you need to be making some decisions so that you
Yeah.
can take action. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think the way you're describing that is like, um, I've often said, and I don't know how I quote myself or whatever, but one of the things that I try to bring up to people is that if you don't have constraints, right, like you can come up with limitless solutions, and what does perfect look like, who even knows, but when you start putting all these constraints on, and that includes time, that includes like you have systems that are already operational, right, like there's a live service running and now people want to rewrite it, and it's like, what does that even mean? And you got to do it in 2 weeks. Like when you start tacking on all these constraints, you have to start getting extremely creative with the engineering to be able to facilitate that. Otherwise, it's like, okay, there's no time constraint. Okay. Or there's no live service that's running and it's a totally green field. Okay. Like you start having all of these options. And I don't know, I feel like the creativity part kind of is lacking when you don't have those constraints.
Yeah, I think so for sure. You're making me think of this. One of the things, talking about constraints, it's a different kind of way, but I always called it just giving yourself options when you're designing things. When you were talking about this, you made me think, because I didn't have a term for it.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
just like just designing for options. Um, Aaron Stannard, he calls it optionality.
Okay.
And he has a few different blog posts. I've done this on this too. We talk about the same thing, which is just giving yourself options that are low cost when you're kind of building systems. So it's not, again, like it's not gold plating. It's not building out this highly configurable thing. It's just there's certain things that you can do that are generally low cost that give you options through kind of any kind of long-lived system. And I think you kind of start figuring that stuff out, what those options are, through just having to make decisions, and forcing yourself to like, okay, I got to go this route or this route, which one gives me the most options at the lowest cost. I don't think it's like a necessarily like a thing people are immediately thinking of, because oftentimes, like, I'll get questions on YouTube or anywhere about, I'm giving the exact, this seems far powerful what I'm saying,
Sure. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
people often talk about like domain driven design,
Yep.
and they'll talk about, I say this all, they get fixated on kind of the technical, people call them like the tactical patterns of repositories and all these things, or how you're supposed to do something. And they get so set on, how do I do this, like based off of domain driven design, and they get so fixated on that that they lose sight of like what they're really even trying to do, and they're actually making things more complicated than they need to be. So the options part of this is just realizing, I guess, the systems you're building, what you're building. Don't guess the future for sure. But it's still, there's things that you can do to make your life easier because things will evolve. So to make that more concrete for people, rather than just a bunch of nonsense, that are really easy, is just really understand, it's tough, but really understand what I was talking about, like what business you're in, what line of business, what domain, understanding it, and understanding kind of like the workflows of what happens in a system. Because oftentimes anytime building features, oftentimes, you can probably relate to this, is people will bring up the solution to you rather than actually the problem.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes like their solution to the problem, most times the problem is really superficial, and it's actually more deeper than that, or it's like a workflow process thing that really indicates really what the solution should be.
Right.
But it just becomes a superficial solution on top of like a Band-Aid to a problem that maybe you don't really even need to have.
Yeah.
So if you can start figuring out some of that stuff, the technical aspect of it it really does relate around that. So when we're talking about like a repository or something like that, like let's say abstracting your database.
Yep.
Is that a good idea? People would say, yeah, that's a great idea. My answer would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know the context. Like, do you need to abstract your data? Let's say, for example, you had a really tiny CRUD app around, like, I don't know, a couple entities or tables or data models. And if you were like looking the source code and you see, oh, well, there's maybe, I don't know, a dozen calls to the database. Do you really need to write some abstraction around a dozen calls?
Right, where the amount of abstraction is going to dwarf like the number of calls to the database.
Yeah. So like, oh, well, we could, because we want to abstract this so we can test it easier. You could still test. Like there's different, like the testing aspect is one reason why you choose to go down that path, but just blatantly say, oh, well, it could be anything. Let's say, some type of like blob storage or something like that. Let's say you're using some Azure service or AWS S3 or something like that. It's like, do you need to abstract it? It's like, well, depends how many usages I have. Like if there's 10, that's very different between 10 and 1,000.
Yeah.
Right. So everything plays into kind of when you're making decisions about like, where's the value in the system? What are you working on? And not having to be so, I guess what I'm really trying to get at is just being a little bit more pragmatic.
Yeah.
It's just so rigid about, oh, I need to follow this pattern, or I need to do this, and I need to do it in this way. Because there really just isn't, it goes back to the whole silver bullet thing. It's just like, there just isn't. So
right.
The sooner you can figure out maybe what the best options are and roll with it, and being very reflective about what works and what doesn't.
Well, and it sounds like from something you said earlier, where you're saying some of the best developers you've worked with have a lot of that domain knowledge, being able to channel that, plus adding on top of that the experience of like, I've seen these types of things enough times to go, okay, like for myself, like, yeah, like have I abstracted databases too many times? Like, yep, like I have definitely done that. But now that I've seen it enough times, if I'm working in a domain where if I have a lot of knowledge around that, I can start making a more informed decision to say, like something like you were just talking about, to be like, do I need to really do that? And it's like, actually, maybe there is a good
Yeah.
use case in this domain where I should be considering that. But because I've seen it enough times, I can understand what the cost of doing that is in the code base, or make an informed decision around that. But I think like those two things, like the domain knowledge and then having some of that experience of having seen it a handful of times, can help with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I find difficult to explain to people is like, it's just experience some of the stuff that you're getting at. It's just like seeing enough of it. And that's where some of the consulting part, I guess, plays a role into it because you're in different domains. You're either a part of kind of new projects or
Mhm.
existing things. So you just get a lot more, yeah, you just get a lot more experience in kind of a shorter window rather than if you're just working on a singular product,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For however
And
you
that's,
could
I
just get
found even a similar thing like working at a startup because, well, I mean, at the very beginning it was one product, but then we had several and there was like different, same domain. It was all digital forensics, but it was like what we're doing and what we're building are different pieces of this. So then you start getting exposed to different things or a new product spinning up and they're like, we're going to build it this way. And we're like, wait a second, like, that's not the same. And then, well, let's consider that, and like, what do we learn from that one? So then the next product spins up and we're like, okay, now we have more data points. But you have to get exposed to some of these things before you can start like feeling like you can make more informed decisions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when I go back to you saying like I felt like in a certain spot I was wildly
Yeah.
unqualified. I don't think I knew it at the time.
Okay.
In hindsight, probably for sure I did. Like, well, I do now. But like some of the decisions that I made that I know were probably poor ones weren't like project breaking, product breaking, like horrible things. They were more so oftentimes about the way I it's a really good example. I lacked understanding of what the end goal was
Mhm.
for the business. Like I didn't really have a good, clear enough idea of what it was. So then the technical decisions behind that might be problematic. I'll give a really kind of weird example.
Sure.
Um, well, the sub people that can somewhat understand is that so let's say in a warehouse, you could think of like shipping, receiving, it's just distribution. So you're ordering products from some type of vendor manufacturer, you receive that in your warehouse, then you may be shipping that out and selling that to consumers or businesses, whatever the case may be. Um, all of the actions of receiving product, doing the different actions of like inventory counts or shipping product out, that like that whole big they're kind of processes under a larger process. There's a bunch of processes that kind of chain together or kind of work together. And if I understood that sooner, it would have made other parts of the system easier, I would say less complicated. So
Okay.
I mean by that is like, let's say you were just counting, let's say you needed to keep track of inventory.
Right.
This is like
Okay.
the common example people always use is, okay, well, I received product into the warehouse from the manufacturer or whatever, and then I shipped some out and I had some break. So like there's some number in the system that we have that's like our inventory for that particular product. That would be, I think, how most people naively would think about inventory of like, I need to build an inventory system.
That checks out with me, and I know nothing about inventorying, so that's
Exactly. But
perfect.
like
Yep.
that's the thing, right? It's that if you were just kind of nonchalant doing this, that seems like on the surface what it is.
Sure.
But the reality of it is that's not the case at all. Is that the actual number in a system of like, hey, we got 47 of this widget means nothing. Like it's not even really a thing in an actual distribution because what is the point of truth is physically, because we're talking about physical goods, is actually what's on the shelf somewhere in a warehouse. Like that is really what it is. So then you say, well, you still need a number in the system so somebody could look at it and say, oh, we got like 40 of these things left. is that, yeah, but it's not really the point of truth. It's just a number that's representing closely, potentially, really what you have. It's
Interesting.
not, you don't really actually make hard decisions off that number.
Yeah. The source of
So there'll
truth is the
be,
shelf, right? Like that,
yeah,
which physically is there.
yeah. So for example, you wouldn't have a business rule that states we cannot oversell. Like there's only 40. If somebody tries to, like, we get down to one, it's not like, for example, like concert tickets or something like that, where like, or you're going to an event where there's like a limited number of seats. In distribution, it's like, okay, there's one product left. Okay, you can sell three.
Yeah.
Because it's not, it sounds weird, is that it's not that you can't sell more, it's that you need to purchase more.
Yeah. It's like a pipelining like process, like all these. That's a really interesting point. It's that's making more sense now. Like they're chaining together to.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is you're purchasing more so that you can sell more, and then the number for sales, like what really the number they care about is really just kind of that roundabout number, which also triggers purchasing and, okay, I need to buy more. And there's kind of processes around this, but it's, again, like superficially you would think, oh, like the quantity on hand really matters. It's like, no, it doesn't.
Hmm. Okay.
So that's the business part of, like, because if you think technically, if you were implementing this, how would you keep track of all this?
Well, yeah, based on what you said originally, it would be like I need a count in a database. Like I need what's the product ID, what's the
Yeah.
count, and got some things that make that number go up and some other things that make that number go down, and problem solved, right?
Yeah, and it's not that way at all. Right. And I know, like, we're talking about like actually a complex domain, and we're making it sound simple, for example. And
Sure. Yeah.
that is the case. But I do remember at the very beginning being in it, thinking exactly the way I'm describing. It's like, oh, there's some count, like exactly what you're saying. Like that seems obvious, but it's not really that way. And if you understood kind of warehousing, like anybody in a warehouse would be like, well, that's this. Yeah, no, it actually works this way. And,
Yeah.
and then you'd be like, oh, okay, that makes entire sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing with accounting. So one of my mentors, kind of in that consulting phase, was actually an accountant.
Okay.
But that makes no sense, probably. You're like, hey, you're a software person, and
What
you're
were his
like,
architecture skills like? Yeah.
yeah. But it made a lot of sense because they thought about things very differently than I did.
Okay.
And the way that, even when I would talk to them about just the projects I was working on and things I was working with, they just had a very different way of thinking about it. So that's one of the kind of the benefits, I guess, in consulting, is that if you are working in different domains, you'll start to see the overlap of them. They're different, obviously. Like so for example, you would think like, oh, let's say software project work, like you're like not product based, I mean project based type thing, where you have some client needs something get built out. You kind of, however you want to do this, whether it's obviously something iterative still, but there's still some scope to the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That in, say, a project based work for, let's say, construction, like building a house or building something in the automotive world, because that's where I live near Detroit here.
Yeah.
They're actually very, very close. Like building software and, say, building a project like a mold for some part on a vehicle are actually very, very close.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, that's the thing, is, but you wouldn't think it unless, because it's really the project-based work nature of it, that the underlying kind of what you're actually doing is very, very similar.
Interesting.
The iteration is very similar. There's obviously differences, but they are still very similar. And once you kind of see it,
Right.
it's kind of hard to unsee it. So when you're in one domain and you're in another one, you can start seeing the similarities.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of this. People are like, this is a technical show? Yeah. But I'll give you an example. In kind of the manufacturing world, like project-based manufacturing, like especially for automotive, is let's say like a mold for a bumper on a car. You'll have a quote come in from one of the auto manufacturers to one of the companies that's doing this. and somebody will estimate that how to build a mold for that part. Those estimators are extremely experienced. They have a lot of historical knowledge about other other projects they had that are almost the exact same thing. So they really can rely on history, their own knowledge, the knowledge of the person sitting next to them, that's the estimator.
Mm-hmm.
They have this a lot of historical information about what something might cost and how long it would take. So they're going through that bidding process. What then happens is once they kind of do the work and you go through actually operationally getting it done, there's all this cost associated, material, time. And what happens is there's a feedback loop that goes from kind of the end of the project of did the company actually make money on this part
Mm-hmm.
to build this mold, so that the next time we get in that same similar bumper for a different year, a new model year, it's like, what did we quote last time? How'd that go? Like you can build based off that history, right? That exact same thing exists similarly in transportation.
Okay.
Where it's the same thing. I need you to urgently move some freight from point A to point B, and they might call that like a lane. It's what did I do it for before? What vehicle? Like what's this like? What vehicle type? Because pricing is based off what vehicle you might use. There's still this feedback loop. It's still kind of project based. It's a one-off thing you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're shipping something from point A to point B. There's a rate to that, and there's this constant feedback loop because the rates are always changing. So once you kind of see the similarities between manufacturing a bumper
Right.
to shipping a one-off product, having a shipment, they correlate a lot.
Right. And then the extension to that is then you go, okay, well, software. Now we're building features out, and
Exactly. So it's like, how did you implement, for example, a certain part of a workflow? Because the data might be similar. Because now you start thinking, oh, okay, I can see how these how data in that world is similar to this world, because it's like this is this transactional stuff here that's in the same type of loop that's over there, and what does that look like? So then that's where the technical aspects of it comes in, where you can start seeing maybe this is how we're going to implement this part of the system, because not everything in your system has the same value.
sure, yeah.
Right? So it's like there's some stuff that's just CRUD by nature, and you're just whipping on a UI over top of the database,
Yep.
right? And then there's some parts that are really workflow process driven that will look completely different. And you're not going to implement them the same way, like at all. You may not even store data in kind of the same type of way. So I think those experiences, seeing different domains, hopefully now I've explained enough of it where people can see, okay, that's why understanding business process and all that stuff will really shape technically the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
Because it's not all just, UI on top of a database, basically.
No, and I really like the examples too of taking two things that are completely not software and kind of illustrating like even those are, you can compare those, and it's interesting. It's like a forecasting type of thing, right? Like you take historical information, you
Exactly, yeah.
forecast out, and like, is it going to be perfect? No, like nothing's ever perfect, but like you use the information you have, make the best decisions you can, and then have a feedback loop so that you can try to make a better decision in the future.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, is that really different than, say, project software-based work?
Like
Like iterations through, say, whether you're doing Scrum or something else, like you're doing some iterative development.
yeah, what comes to mind for me is like I think the thing that makes it more challenging, and I don't know anything about the two other industries that you said, so like I could be completely out here, but I think when it comes to software, I find that people, including myself, people find it harder to sort of quantify like the amount of effort. Like, hey, yes, I have done this before, but is it a direct comparison? Like it starts to feel a little bit hand wavy, and that's where I
Yeah.
can see people kind of get into the weeds of like, well, especially if you're doing story points and stuff, like, no, that's not a 5, that's now a 7, it must be a 7. It's like, okay, maybe we just need to go build it. Like
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of that translates to it. I think estimating is really difficult, but I don't know. I kind of have a little bit of a gripe of it was more of a kind of a combative conversation. It probably still is. I just don't pay attention to it anymore. I remember years ago about like all the how estimating is impossible, and I never really thought it was impossible. It was just I think of maybe at the scale of what people were trying to estimate things.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's just experience, I guess.
Yeah, it for me it wasn't an impossible thing. It was more like when we're getting so trying to be so granular on things that we cannot be that granular about. Like how much time are we going to waste on this? Like because if we were to stop talking about this, we could have built it by now. Like
Yeah.
that's where it starts to feel very terrible for me. But in general, like I can totally understand that, especially if you're working with different stakeholders, like you have to think outside of the programming bubble to be like, okay, like other people are going to rely on this. There's going to be end users, there might be other teams that have to build on top of this. There's sales and marketing that probably need to know what's coming down the pipeline so they can start talking about it. So just sitting there going like, we can't estimate it, like it's not really fair for a
Well,
business.
that's the thing because I always thought again, and going back to the consulting stuff, is somebody's cutting the check for it.
Yeah.
They need to know what they're paying for
Yeah.
and relatively like what they're getting for it.
Yeah.
Like nobody, it'd be like you like, oh, I need a new roof on my apartment or house or whatever the case may be. It's like the person's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what it's going to cost. It's
yeah.
like,
We'll have to see once
doesn't
we
really work
start,
that
like, and it might, yeah, we'll just see.
way. Yeah.
It's not going to work. I need a roof.
Like I know it's a bad comparison because people be like, oh, like it's a little easier. I get it, but my the point is still you generally as kind of the one as a consumer of it that has to pay for it.
Yeah,
And no matter what it is, you still want to have some insight on what the range is
sure.
of what you're getting into.
And I think that's an important part, right? Is like I think a lot of the time when people get into estimating things, and I don't know, I'm kind of going back to some of my earlier career, like when I remember sitting down and like in these meetings with story points and stuff, it felt like people were trying to find what the perfect estimate would be, which doesn't even make sense. But what you just said was like a range, and I think if people could start thinking about that more, of like if we have some range where we can all leave the room feeling like that seems reasonable. And then on top of that, you can talk about like mitigation strategies or communication strategies where like you're partway into that. It's absolutely not going to be that timeline. Okay, not the end of the world. Everything doesn't just turn off. Like, what do you do to communicate that, give people the visibility, like the stakeholders that care about that? What are you going to do now? Because if you're just like, well, we're off target and I guess that's it, we're cooked here, then then yeah, everything's going to fall apart and estimating's going to feel really bad. So
Yeah, there was a post. Udi Dahan has a post. It's I don't even know how old it is now. I'll send you the link to it,
oh yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm kind of well, I am paraphrasing here, but it's something to the effect of the template for it is he describes why, but it's you know what I mean with you know what I mean if you say let's just yourself or
mm,
however many people, this many people or just myself working this often on it, like in terms of like how because obviously people have meetings or potentially another stuff with this level of certainty, this is what you actually think it is. Like you're qualifying it. You're putting
yeah,
context to just some number rather than just like, oh, it's this long.
yeah,
It's like, what does that even mean, right? So it's really just about qualifying what kind of your estimate is. But the other thing too, going full circle here,
yeah,
like the consulting thing in estimating too, is it's opportunity cost. It's like, what are you actually working on that maybe isn't like I said, not everything has the same value. So it's what do you think something's going to take, and it doesn't need to be like you said perfect. Not at all. It's just it's a little bit better than a grenade on like
yeah,
oh this is a big deal or it's not a big deal, right?
yeah. And it's so often too that like especially if you're doing sprint work or anything like that, like people set out with something in mind. You get a couple days into your sprint or whatever, and someone comes by and they say plans have changed.
Yeah,
This is now the highest priority thing. Like these are very, especially in startups, very common conversations. And then being able to go back to who that stakeholder is. So say it's your manager, say it's a product manager, whoever, someone who's trying to influence the direction of what's being developed. and going back to them and being able to have this conversation of like, here's the things we're working on. You're now asking for this. If we do a similar exercise, like truly, do you still think that's a higher priority? If so, like again, if it's a startup, like this is what the business needs to get to tomorrow or to
Yeah.
next week or whatever. Okay. So what are we trading for this, right? But people can start making those more informed decisions without that and no estimates or anything. You're like, well, how do we even make a decision about what to trade out of this if we have no idea what's even going on?
Yeah, I think there's this little bit of feeling that developers get of wanting stability, like wanting things just like this is the plan and we're sticking to it. And
Yeah.
it's like there's nothing wrong with it changing. Like you're saying, like, okay, we have this is what our kind of our queue looks like or our sprint looks like. And you know what? In 2 days from now, it might not look like that at all because something else changes. Maybe we got a new customer that needs this for some reason to onboard. Okay. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't need to be that fixed.
I think so. I 100% agree with that. And one of the things I wanted to share related to that is that I don't know if this is actually true, but an observation I have from going from a startup where most people were just like, we want to do what feels like the right thing for the customer because we're a lot closer. I find that in again, don't know if this is actually accurate. It's an observation. I find that the incentives for individual developers at very large companies seem to be very much tied to the specific work they're doing, and I don't like it. Not that I'm blaming the developers. I think it's part of like the system that we end up forming, but it ends up being like, oh well, if I can't work on that project we talked about, then like what's going to happen for my career progression? Like that, like it seems like it's very motivated for like I need to have this thing or else I'm the one who's at risk here. And I always try to remind people like that's not the like if we're talking about a project you're going to work on and it has to get canned or there's something that comes up where a dependency on another team is not going to work, I'd never want a developer sitting there going like, oh my god, my career is over, like I'll never be promoted, I'm going to get demoted. It's like, no, there's other work, like there's lots of work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it totally makes sense to me what you're saying. I've never experienced it because I've never really worked like that
Yeah.
in that type of environment. And again, that's the interesting thing is like everybody has different insights, and that's interesting to hear because that totally makes sense.
That's why I said I totally agree with what you're saying because I don't personally have that. Like if my manager came to me and he was like, "By the way, one of the feature crews that you have that works in this area, like we don't need that anymore or that's moving to another team." I wouldn't be like, "My career." I would be like, "Cool." Like someone who's making a decision around the importance of this, I would be curious about it, of course, but
Yeah.
like I'm not going to freak out. It would be like, cool, now I can go focus in these other areas. Or I would be asking him like, is there some other part that you need me to go take responsibility over? um, but I think that's personally because my experience at a startup was very much like all of the time things were all over the place, and it was, I want to call it organized chaos, but I don't even know if I
Yeah,
can call it
I think so.
organized.
Yeah,
It's
it's
mostly
just more
chaos.
fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say organized chaos is like it's pretty. That's I mean, it can be that way for sure.
So, Derek, we're getting close to. I want to be respectful of your time, but I had one thing that I just wanted to touch on with you because, um, in basically all of the content that I see you either post or talk about on YouTube, you have an incredible way of, like, in my opinion, being pragmatic about literally everything. It's like, I find that when I personally go to talk about topics, and if I have an opinion, I literally pause like in my brain and I have moments where I'm like, I will literally say in my brain, like, how would Derek like try to get like different perspectives on this? Because I don't like talking about things like there's only one side to it because I don't believe that ever. I always think context is important. I think that there's different angles to a situation that might look the same. And I just wanted to, I don't even know what question I'm trying to ask you here, but I wanted your take on
Yeah.
like, how do you channel trying to be pragmatic like in everything you do because you do it so well?
I have no idea. No.
It's magic.
um,
Like do you consciously like do you have to stop yourself and be like, I need to like, think about this a different way, or is it more natural? just from doing it a
So
lot?
I'll explain. Maybe I'll come to it if I explain how
Sure.
I come up with like a video or a blog or something,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that may give some insight on how I think about things. So never mind how I get the idea. Oftentimes it's just I have a list going, but
Sure.
usually what I do is once I've set in stone, okay, I'm going to do a topic, like I'm going to do a video or something on this topic. I just think about it quite a bit and probably historically put a similar, like, think about a situation that I've been that it applies to. Every topic I've covered, this is probably why. So, like, I'm rubber ducking here.
Perfect.
It's because everything I've done, like, I don't know if there's one topic I really haven't that isn't something I've experienced. So it all comes from that place, really. So it's not like, oh, I want to use this technology. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I don't, that's not really my lane of like, hey, I'm going to look at, like, try this technology out or something. And I play with it and then do a video on it. It's usually about problems or things that I've faced indirectly through the topic. So that's usually where it probably all comes from. Is that so like the trade-off stuff is probably because I've experienced both.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And even if you haven't lived through both necessarily, I'm suspecting that if you had a topic
Yeah.
where like we at least debated these things or we analyzed these things, we went with one and we saw this outcome, but we had to go talk about all the other sides of it.
Yeah. Like, I'll give an example. So earlier I mentioned about, like, abstracting a database or something like
Hmm.
that. And that one probably hits home to a lot of people, or maybe not. I think that one's probably the one they think about the most, or a topic that comes up is like, oh, should I abstract this or not abstract this? Is that so in 2015, um, was not .NET Core, or .NET as it is today, did not exist yet. I want to say about 2015. You might know this more than I do. Was What did they call it first? Like VNext or something like that?
There was .NET. They had like standard or something. Like, is
They
that
had a moniker for it, but
okay?
anyways,
Yeah,
it wasn't
that I don't know.
really. It really wasn't a thing yet. Like .NET Core 1.0 was not a thing yet.
Okay.
But I was well enough aware of what was going on, and I was using .NET Framework 4.8 on Windows, basically. As .NET Core 1 came out, and then .NET Core 2 and ASP.NET Core 2 at that time, this was probably like 2018, somewhere around there, maybe. I'm getting my dates. I was just very well aware of the size of the product I was in, all using .NET Framework, and how we could transition to .NET Core. And there was a lot of technical stuff, and it wasn't a big bang. It was a small incremental changes that we had to make along the way.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that I learned from that. And as the example, there was .NET Framework, or sorry, Entity Framework, and then there's Entity Framework Core. And there were changes all over the place related to different third-party libraries we were using. And yeah, like you mentioned with .NET Standard, there was a lot of technical stuff going on at that time. And that taught me a lot about kind of the abstractions that we had in our system, what was useful, what wasn't.
Sure.
And as an example, one of the third-party libraries we used, even it basically underlying changed, like, pretty significantly, the API surface that it had. And we maybe had usage of this in a large system, maybe, let's say, I don't know, 50 places maybe made a method call now that did not exist or changed a little bit. Actually, it was worse than that. This is what it was. It was a non-asynchronous call that turned
Okay.
into a synchronous call.
Oh, okay.
So that can get pretty viral, right? Where now all of a sudden you have to await something and your whole call stack.
It's only your whole call stack, though. That's fine.
Yeah, it's only the whole thing. No problem. But the reality of it is like, let's say those 50 places or something that it affected, it really wasn't the end of the world.
Mm.
The way the rest of the system was built, like, the call stack wasn't huge, so it didn't matter that
Right.
much at the end of the
If it was
day.
abstracted, it would have been quicker maybe, but to go
Yeah.
now, let's go abstract it so we never pay this cost again. It's almost like,
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, it's like so some of that is often what I preach is just um, like to the specifics of abstraction is knowing when you need it, what the value of it is, and not having it isn't the end of the world. Depends on the degree of coupling that you have to something. So like the trade-off. So when we talk about like the trade-offs of stuff and thinking about it, it's because it's just experience of being in a situation where maybe something wasn't. Would it have been helpful? Yeah. Was it a big of a deal that it wasn't? No.
right.
Right. Like we were still using interfaces for it that made it easier to test, but like the underlying, like it changed.
Yeah.
Was it the end of the world? No. So that makes it you kind of keenly aware now of like when you're using a dependency, like what's the degree of coupling that you have to it? How important is that thing? Where is it being used in your system? So there's just like a lot of things that you can start seeing as trade-offs that there really isn't necessarily at first glance sometimes a right answer.
Right.
And
I
you
have
can
a,
see, okay, maybe I go this way, maybe I go that way. There's just trade-offs.
yeah, and I have a really good example that is the opposite, and it was terrible that I made a decision about. And don't don't hurt my feelings here, but I was like, I need my own iLogger interface, and I need that because I don't trust anyone. Like, I
Yeah.
don't trust that the API, like, I need to basically have that level of abstraction between myself and everyone else. I need that because if I'm putting a logger in places, the surface area is going to be incredible. Like, if someone changes that API, I am totally screwed here. So for a long time, it was like new project, iLogger interface that I dream up gets put in. And then if I'm picking a logger implementation, I wrap it. Great. Now I'm totally protected because I only have to change it in one spot if I pick a different logger or they change their API. And then what I realized over time was like the logging APIs just do not change like at all. If
Yeah.
anything, it's like instead of like log debug, it's just like dot debug instead. Like it's so trivial. And I'm
Yeah.
going, why am I doing this? Because now if I want to go switch to like a newer logging framework, I'm doing more work to try and wrap this stuff up with the dependency injection. I'm like, this is so dumb. And it's all because I wanted to force myself to have this separation.
I think that's what you're expressing there is super common for people that they want to own kind of the abstraction. They want to own it rather than something else.
Right.
I think that's a pretty common. I would guess it's a pretty common reason that people want to do it. But I always say
Maybe
if
not
you're
with
creating an
loggers, but
abstraction, what's that?
so maybe not with loggers, but yeah.
Yeah, but like most times it's I think for that reason. Then the other one is if you're creating an abstraction or anything based off like a singular implementation that you're creating it just around that. So if you think that you're all of a sudden your abstraction is going to fit something else, another implementation behind it, oftentimes it doesn't.
Yeah, very very good point. And like I think at the point, and I don't know why I stuck with log for net for like so many years, and then I remember like waking up and being like, wait a second, there's a million different loggers. But yeah, like you're exactly right. I was like, I use log for net. I'm basically just going to almost clone what their API service looks like, and I'm like, now I'm safe. Like,
Yeah.
but I hadn't actually explored different things. Now, like I personally build a lot of plugin systems, and that ends up forcing me, like the first few plugins I put together, I'm like, the API is terrible. And then I build a few of them out, and then I see the commonalities, and now it starts to get a little bit more solidified. But it takes examples
Yeah.
before you can start to get a good abstraction. So
Yeah.
very
I
cool.
think I think those are pretty common examples. Yeah. And I always say too, is just, yeah, where they have value as well as for me, always the purpose is to simplify whatever I'm using for a given use case. If I don't have a use case for it, or I'm not trying to simplify it,
Mhm.
then I don't really know what I'm doing, like
Yeah.
what I'm creating it for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think my logger example is just me kind of focused on the wrong thing, like being hyper focused on like what if that
Yeah.
breaks, And
I know.
in hindsight too, if that would have been the case, it would have been like probably just renaming log methods. Like it wouldn't have actually
Exactly.
been.
Yeah, you could, and half the time, I've done this before too. It's just you rip it out, you create some extension methods or some shims to fill in the void,
Yeah.
and then you're off to the races.
Yeah, all the information or dependencies I needed were still present in all of the areas that would have used it. So
Yeah,
yeah. Anyway, that's really awkward and fun to talk about. So I wanted to share my my terrible abstraction story. But
it's all good.
yeah. Well, Derek, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. I guess before signing off here, if folks want to reach out to you, where's the best spot? Obviously, YouTube is where you got most of your content, but where can people find you?
Yeah, just on YouTube, everything monikered as Code Opinion. So codeopinion.com or my blog or on X. That's pretty much it. Or LinkedIn, I guess.
Awesome. Okay, well, Derek, thanks again. This is super. Like, I really enjoyed this because I, read and watch a lot of your material. I really look up to the stuff that you're putting out there. So, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks.